The government of India neither shut down Twitter, nor did it jail anybody, nor did it have any other punitive consequences imposed on Twitter.
8 years and 2 weeks ago, we spoke about technology. So much has changed since then. But I think, that time you were just grappling with sort of what digital India will be. And I'm very tempted to give you to start with the full toss and tell us what has changed in the last 8 years and 2 weeks. But I won't do that. I'll go to one thing very specific. Specifically, I thought 8 years ago, my view was that technology being brought into India, technology was being brought into India on the backs of a few very, very large corporates. They were largely corporates that were from Silicon Valley, a place where you spend time yourself. And I think more than dealing with technology, we were trying to process how to deal with these companies. Is that a fair statement to make?
No, I think, Anand, 8 years ago, or even before, if you look at what we used to talk about technology, all of those who were interested, we all had a deep intuitive sense that technology is a force for good. Technology is going to change the way our future is going to unfold in front of us. So we had a lot of these macro 80,000 feet above sea level type of intuition and instinct about the power of good that technology would deliver. And then came along these big platforms who were not so big at that time, but certainly used this innate feeling and intuition amongst all of us that technology would do good, and so therefore they were harbingers of this good that technology is promised. And so we allowed them to grow, unfettered, because they, in a lot of ways, masqueraded and behaved as innovators and innovation on the move. And so therefore governments, people, citizens, all of us, media included, looked at this as a good thing. So if there was this social media platform that was in Palo Alto, California, or Menlo Park, or wherever, they said, look, we are giving you the power of search, we are giving the power of social media. There was really no narrative that opposed it in any way, excepting to say, look, give me more. So 8 years ago, if you looked forward at technology, all of these things that we are grappling with today, both opportunities and challenges, really didn't occur to us. We only saw technology being good, gooder, and goodest. So that was at a macro level. However, one of the big things that we started seeing a sign of 8 years ago when we spoke was that for the first time there was political leadership that was wanting to deploy technology not just for the you and me and the sophisticated Indian, but also for the Indian who was very far removed from government and governance and democracy, and that technology would in some ways transform their lives too. So that narrative was just beginning to take shape when we last spoke. Yeah. And today it's full-blown, almost a centerpiece of what Digital India is.
But tell me, when did these companies, because we're talking about them in a very, in a nuanced way now, when was that turning point, you think, when these companies became, not good or goodest, but when it became like, okay, we need to pause?
I've actually tried to do some homework on this and research on it, especially after I was given this opportunity to serve as a minister. And I think there was no single inflection point where suddenly the social media platform that was a warm, fuzzy place for all of us to meet and greet friends became this platform for user harm, doxing, gaslighting, and all kinds of new user harms. There is no sudden moment that I've read the Plex, the Google story repeatedly. There was no sudden one moment where Google became something other than just convenience and a convenient way to crawl the internet. But certainly over time, as they've become more and more profitable, they've become financially more and more powerful, they have also started becoming more and more powerful presences on the internet. And in many ways, these platforms have carved out islands where they are almost dominant. Yes. So there's a search island, there's a social media island, all of those islands. So those have, in a sense, crept on us without us really seeing the trend, seeing a pattern, seeing a design. And I don't think as well today, and I'm maybe being kind to them, that I don't think they set out to do this world domination either.
Yeah.
I think it just so happened that they became what they became.
I think that's very. I think they just grew so fast.
they
It's
grew
very
so fast,
difficult to then set the guardrails.
Exactly right.
But we must get into Twitter because that and Jack Dorsey's
Seems
comments.
to be a favorite topic one of these days. Yes.
So your relationship with Twitter also has been quite exciting. So you want to just, I don't know, I've just shared.
No, so look, I'm very candid on this and very clear on this. My relationship or the government's relationship with any platform is really simply through the prism of compliance with the law, compliance with the rule. So there is nothing personal, there is nothing adversarial against one platform or the other. But we consistently, including my predecessors and my successors, will certainly consistently ask for only one thing, which is that regardless whether you're big platform, small platform, foreign platform, Indian platform, that the respect for Indian laws is totally an ask and an uncompromising ask on part of the government and the people of India. With Twitter and this recent controversy of Jack Dorsey's statement, and I think I called it out for what it is yesterday, it's an outright lie because at no time in the history, specifically in the 2020 period to 2022 period, has the government of India ever done anything to Twitter, despite the fact, and this is the irony of it, that despite the fact that platform was in violation of Indian law for a period of 2 years, that the government of India neither shut down Twitter, nor did it jail anybody, nor did it have any other punitive consequences imposed on Twitter. And it is ironical because, I use the word ironical because I have to quote inaction on part of the government against a violation of law to out a lie that Jack Dorsey has put out there. Why he's put it out there? Is it political season in the US? Is he trying to claw his way back into relevance? All of those questions he can answer. But certainly, without any fear of contradiction, what he has said is an outright lie.
But there is this level of swag or this level of irreverence that the Silicon Valley founders sort of carry with them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that governments around the world have deified them for so many years. Oh, you are this great, creator, innovator, and therefore we consider you the god of the internet. And so, therefore, they have, in a sense, escaped oversight, escaped the demand for compliance with law for several years. Not just in India, by the way, it's all around the world. You saw that in the crypto space. You saw that in more recently the crypto space. So I think with Twitter in specific, one of the things that is quite out there in public domain, or two things that are there in public domain now, is that they believed that they were a sovereign entity and therefore the rules and laws of any nation didn't apply. And that, of course, we swiftly disabuse them of that. That in India, we are a democratic country. We live by the rule of law, and therefore, regardless of whether you are in San Francisco, or Menlo Park, or Bangalore, or Hyderabad, the rule of law applies to you as well. Number one. Number two, I think with the Twitter files, that then the exposure that we've seen in early 23 and late 22, it also has become very clear that these platforms require more oversight because of the kind of arbitrary and abuse of power and misuse of power that they exercise, either because they follow a particular political ideology or because somebody just wants to play God. So a lot of this stuff about Twitter that is now in the public domain reinforces the need for governments all around the world to have, including in India, to have very clear guardrails and do's and don'ts for these platforms that can exercise so much abuse of power if they're allowed to do so.
And the problem with that, Rajivji, is that, sometimes you wonder that how much of a gap and delay there is in laws and regulation catching up with the innovation. And it's always going to be a game of catch-up. We have to accept that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and we are now catching up for the last decade of not doing anything. And the whole world is talking. When I was part of the Indo-EU Trade and Technology Council meetings in Brussels recently, they are talking about the same things. What is the future of AI? How do we protect our citizens against misuse of AI? How do we deal with user harm on the internet? These are all questions that are looking for answers in capitals all around the world, not just in Delhi or not just in India. But I think what we are doing today is certainly, in a sense, signaling to the world that as the world's largest connected nation, as the world's largest single base on the global internet, that we are shaping the guardrails, and we are, through a process of consultation and engagement, trying to create a framework that other countries can follow as well. So I think the world is looking to India's leadership simply because we are the largest connected nation, and we are, in a way, approaching this in the correct manner, is what I feel.
If we look back in the last 8 years, what you kind of would see, what I think is that America has done digital with innovation, China has done digital with imitation,
Sure.
and Europe has done digital with regulation. Is there one word that you think India will do digital with?
No, I use a phrase when I make presentations to students in university. I say that, digital leads India, India leads digital, and when I look at the young Indian in the audience, I say, you will lead digital India. So there are these three real things that are happening, that certainly the digital economy and innovation is going to be a much more bigger part, significant part of the overall economy. We were about 4% in 2014. We are close to 10% today. That is, digital economy as a percentage of GDP. And by 26, we will be 20% of the GDP, the digital component. So certainly, digital India will lead India. India will certainly lead digital in the world. I think today there is not one place in the technology ecosystem, one slice where India is not present. Quantum, semiconductor, microelectronics, AI, the internet, the consumer net, all of that, every bit of the technology ecosystem, India is present, Indian entrepreneurship is present, Indian startups are present, Indian research is present. So I think it is safe to say that for many decades, India was a consumer of tech. We sort of bought it. Yeah. When I was an entrepreneur, certainly in cellular, including the screw and the screwdriver were imported. And going forward, India will be, if not the leader, but certainly amongst the leading pack of nations that will shape the future of tech, that will shape future devices, future products, future solutions, and future software.
And if not India, certainly Indians will, because it seems that almost every major company has an Indian as a leader now in the tech world.
But I think, Anand, we are no longer happy with that. Yeah. We are no longer happy vicariously living through somebody else's success.
That's an important point.
Yeah. So no, I think that was certainly a narrative that we enjoyed for several years and decades. Enjoying the success of Sundar Pichai, enjoying the success of Satya Nadella, enjoying the success of Arvind Krishna at IBM. But I think now what we are saying is we want not just 108 unicorns, we want 1,000 unicorns. And we want the intellectual property, we want the creativity, we want the innovation ecosystem in India. And I just heard a quote, I think, from the Sequoia founder who said that, and Chamath, that India is one of the most exciting innovation ecosystems in the world for startups. Yeah. That is certainly what we want to focus on, rather than just living vicariously of other people's success.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the correction in tech that's happening in America, and how much you think that will play out in India. Certainly, I think a lot of the big tech startups in India, unicorns, multi-unicorns, there is a certain correction. There is a certain correction in valuation.
Of course.
And that valuation correction does impact the jobs, the size of the organization. How closely are you watching it? Do you think it's overdue?
No, Anand, I think you followed tech for long enough. I have followed tech. I've lived in tech for long enough to know that if your nose is following just the valuation curve, then you're bound to keep doing this. You're just going to do this sinusoidal. But if you average out that, you see what the slope is across that, you'll see that there's been a consistent growth in value that is being created by the digital ecosystem around the world. There is consistent growth of the digital economy as a part of the global economy, as we are seeing in India as well. So if you just look at the trend line, it is solid growth despite all these occasional meltdowns you had in the early 2000s, where I was on the other side of the meltdown. Yeah. We saw the internet bubble burst. So those type of valuation corrections will always follow. I think now the hot thing is AI. And so anybody who has an AI startup can command his value or her value. Uh, Semiconductor startups are now seeing, AI compute startups are seeing value. You see NVIDIA's valuation.
Yeah.
Just a few
Yeah.
years ago, it was just another semiconductor company struggling to make gaming boards, high-performance gaming boards, and here they are now almost $1 trillion company.
Yeah.
So I think that is part of the technology ecosystem. As people see a certain trend, a certain new disruption, capital will fly towards there, bubbles will be formed, then it will correct. That is, in my opinion, part of the DNA of a technology ecosystem. Now, are many startups going bust? Are many people running out of capital to grow? Of course, and that is again, in my opinion, the very nature of being in a startup ecosystem. That type of volatility, succeed or fail, is part of what startups are. I don't see anything dramatically different, excepting that post the Ukraine-Russia war, there is a certain risk aversion that has emerged for the equity class as a whole. And so therefore there is less capital that is running after private equity deals, or if they are running after it, they are because of demand supply rationalization, that the valuations have corrected.
Aren't you being too kind to this whole game? Because it sounds like a lot of these guys were getting valuation based on customers
Look,
and user acquisition, and then they had no bottom line. They disrupted industries,
Yeah.
but they never landed their own business model.
No, Anand, look, I certainly don't want to pick on any company or pick on any particular investor.
No, okay, I'll say the name. You're a minister, I'll say a name. I'll give a name like Byju's. It was the largest valuation, largest startup in the country. I think the last valuation they did was $20 billion, $22 billion valuation. They raised money at that valuation, and then they're talking about raising debt. So when you're so big, does the government does it get concerned how many jobs will be on the street? Like in my industry, BuzzFeed shut down news.
Yeah.
Quartz sold down for $1. Vox is in bankruptcy.
Look, on
Vice is in bankruptcy.
this particular area of an investee's bid and an investor's response to that, investee's ask and an investor's response to that ask, really governments cannot come into it. It's private capital going after private opportunity. So I don't think if like I say to people, even the Constitution even though it doesn't say it, there is a fundamental right for everybody to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that applies to investors as well. So if somebody wants to make an investment based on a particular narrative or a deck that says, look, there is this untapped market for education is so big in India, and I have size and scale and market dominance for that market, and I think I can command a $20 billion valuation. And the other side, somebody says, okay, fine, I'm willing to accept that and write a check. Who's the government to come in the picture? So that will continue. I think that is the model. We will not certainly step in to arbitrate or moderate or intermediate on valuation. It's a private deal between two people who are all both mature. One has the money, one wants the money, and the twain shall do a deal.
Artificial intelligence. You were there. I had an opportunity to host and have a conversation with Bill Gates, and I asked him, "Are we ready for artificial intelligence?" And he said, "I don't think humanity will ever be ready." Was his immediate answer. Well, is India ready? Is the Indian government ready?
We are ready. We certainly, our approach towards artificial intelligence is what the Honorable Prime Minister has said almost 2 years ago. He said, India for AI and AI for India. And he said, AI has tremendous possibilities for the digital economy and for governance. And that is almost the North Star for us. We follow that. And we look at AI from a point of view, it being a kinetic enabler of our digital economy. It's a layer of what we are already doing with data, on what we are already doing with applications and the consumer internet. So, and we certainly today are in a position to bring to bear one of the largest and most diverse data sets in the world. Yeah. So the enormity of what India AI can be and the presence of India AI in the global AI scene I don't think will be trivial. It'll be pretty significant. And Sam Altman breezed through, as you know, Delhi recently.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody says the same thing. Now, on the issue of AI harm is AI going to disrupt jobs? And there are many narratives on this, some just completely off left field on, it is going to completely destroy jobs, versus to the more conservative estimate that AI currently is at an early stage. It is only going to enable tasks, efficiencies, getting things done faster, getting things done with more intelligence, rather than replace humans, mimicking human behavior. Reasoning and human behavior, current AI models are far from it. So at what stage does AI certainly start replacing full jobs? I don't think today anybody who has a reasonable view of AI can say it will happen 5 years from now or 4 years from now. Because the current AI is very, very far from the AGI and the human reasoning and mimicking reasoning type of functionality that you need to replace human behavior or humans. But certainly today, in many job roles, AI knowledge using large language models, using chat GPT type models will become part of the skill requirement. So even if I'm just doing basic data mining in an organization, or I'm doing data entry, or I'm doing something, certainly it becomes now clearer that even in that low level function, you will need some AI skills. So what AI is doing at least in the current context is putting the spotlight on reskilling the workforce, rather than this narrative, which I don't subscribe to, that it's going to certainly take away a whole set of jobs and replace it with models. I mean, I'm sure that all the AI startups want that to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen that fast.
No, I agree. And I mean, even in the newsroom, we had a long session recently. I managed to get the person in charge of AI for BBC News to do a session with us. And it was incredible. I think most people left that room feeling enabled more than threatened.
Yes,
I hope that was the mission. And so
I think certainly, to use that phrase of yours, I think that is certainly how we should use AI. Think of AI, that it's going to enable us and empower us more than what we think is possible, than threaten us at this stage.
But Rajivji, Chat GPT, OpenAI, own Microsoft or Google's version of it, whatever, all these things, these are still from Silicon Valley. We still haven't found that one ubiquitous AI application coming out of India. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And is that something that
But we haven't found it out of Korea, Japan, the US.
No, of course not. But I'm just saying that do we accept that somehow, America will always be ahead in innovation?
Look, I worked in the Valley. I still maintain relationships in the Valley. Look, that is an innovation hotspot that nobody can take away from it.
Yeah.
At best, what we are trying to do today, or the rest of the world is doing, and India, I think, has the pole position on that, is that we can try and be a competing destination for innovation. But for us to assume that suddenly Silicon Valley is going to go to sleep, that's not going to happen. That's impossible. I mean, they have so much going for them. And one of the reasons that AI has succeeded as it has succeeded is the brute force AI compute horsepower that has been built by the Googles of the world, by the Microsofts of the world. You hear about how Microsoft has bought up all of NVIDIA's GPUs.
Yeah.
So AI is not just about innovation and numbers. It also is about billions of dollars of AI compute capacity. Yeah. And that they have built, they have invested in. And if you read the story about Google and Microsoft, and this book I always recommend reading, Genius Makers, Cadmet's. It's a brilliant book about how all these companies got into AI. And they talk about how they struggle to have the capacity. And if you want to explain why has ChatGPT happened when it has happened, why is AI suddenly beginning to take off, it is simply the AI compute capabilities that have now reached critical mass. And I think when Sam Altman was here, he talked about that. He said, look, you may have great data sets, you may have great innovators, you may have a great startup ecosystem, but you certainly need to also focus on the AI compute capability in India, capacity in India.
And how do we do that? How do we grow?
So we have to build those GPUs, we have to build, and CDAC, one of the entities in the government of India, METI, is now focusing on, in a sense, pivoting the high-performance computing, supercomputing mission to now focus on AI compute as their core application. So they are building that capacity. They're working with some of the world's leaders on that. And we need to have that AI compute capacity as part of India AI, and it is a very integral part of PM's vision for India AI, that AI compute capacity to be available to all the research institutions and researchers in India.
How much of how much of all of this progress is dependent on our relationship with America? You know, I think there's this ICET, which I was reading about to prepare for this actually.
Anand, I'll say it like this. I think every reasonable country today understands that the future of tech cannot be led by one country alone, excepting for China, who believes that they can do everything on their own. Pretty much all of the open societies and open democracies and countries of the world realize that the future of tech is about partnerships. So India and US have signed this amazingly futuristic MOU on critical and emerging technologies, which is the ICET. India and EU have entered into this Technology and Trade Council relationship where the EU and India is also working. And we have these relationships with Japan and the Quad as well. So I think the future of AI, the future of semiconductors, the future of electronics, future of these supply chains are all going to be, in a sense, driven by these type of partnerships. And I certainly think, you heard yesterday, I think the US ambassador to India and the National Security Advisor, Ajit Dovalji, speaking at the ICT conference, that AI, quantum, all of these areas, and semiconductor innovation, all of these areas we will see increased participation between Indian startups, Indian institutions, American startups, American companies, American institutions, and the European ones.
Basically, the idea is that it shouldn't be like the India-US nuclear deal. There should actually be more fruitful.
It'll be more of a partnership model. I think the fact that the realization that no one country can do everything. On the quantum hardware side, maybe the Americans and the Japanese can do it. On the quantum, on the software part, maybe the Indian startups and the Indian ecosystem can do it. So these partnerships are the way forward, and anchored by companies on both sides and with an enabling framework and support from the governments.
When government of India has an issue with platforms like Twitter, or at one point, the US government is famous for being very strong advocates for its corporates. They would really they'll bat aggressively for their organizations, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's Google, or whether it's famously Harley Davidson and Trump. I don't know what that was about, but so does that complicate things for us, or is it very clear now established that our law is our law? And
advocacy for a particular company to have market access. Our government does it for our entrepreneurs. Every mission, every embassy of India anywhere in the world is an outpost for Indian commerce and Indian trade. So are the Americans, so are the Japanese, so are the Europeans. That is okay. And certainly no country that is a democratic country will ever say, please permit my company to violate your laws. Certainly that is not an ask that any country will make of India, and that is certainly not an ask that India will make of any other country as well. So it is.
But they might push you to say data localization, don't be so firm.
No, that is not law. That is certainly a policy. They may say, okay, well, don't do data localization. That's against cross-border data flow. We will negotiate this in the digital trade agreement. That's fine. That is negotiation. But I don't think the American government, nor will the European government, nor will the Indian government on a reciprocal basis say, allow our companies to go there and violate, for example, your H-1 visa requirements. We will not do that.
Of course.
Similarly, the Americans will never say, I don't think so, certainly not, that please allow company A or company B, that is a platform in your country, to violate Indian laws and give them diplomatic immunity or some other immunity. Certainly not. So that is never going to be. But that doesn't prevent countries from getting into bilateral discussions about what should be the nature of digital trade, what should be the basis of data movement, and that conversations are on anyway.
Does that complicate things a little bit though, when you see that the missions get involved more than before?
I think from our point of view, our government always operates on principles, especially in the digital space, at least to which I am privy to. We operate on principles, and then we discuss these principles, and if people disagree with the principles, then we will explain to them what our principles mean. For example, on the AI regulation part, I know that we were in a meeting recently with another country, and they were talking about use case regulation, and we were talking about user harm regulation. And they, in the end of the discussion, agreed that our approach towards user harm regulation is probably a better way to harmonize to the two countries' approach towards AI regulation. So
Very
that's the way
interesting.
we approach it.
Tell us a little bit about your Digital India Act that you've been championing, and why did you feel the need to replace the IT Act in the first place?
Multiple reasons, Anand. I think the government realizes, the Honorable Prime Minister realizes that the digital opportunity is a huge opportunity. The main law that underpins the digital economy is the IT Act, which is 23 years old. And certainly you and I can agree that 23 years old in the digital space is more than a couple of centuries old. So the time and the place for a new global standard legislation that can guide, enable our digital economy in the coming years is appropriate. It's here and now. And the Digital Act is in my opinion, a good framework for a forward-looking global standard cyber law. And for the first time ever in the history, we are pre-consulting the Digital India Act. That is, before we even put a pen to paper and have a draft, we are going out there and saying, these are the principles. This is what the Act intends to do. Please give us your view. And we've had three very, very, very deep pre-consultations with lawyers and users and companies and startups. And so it's a process that the Prime Minister keeps repeating, that when we legislate for the future, legislate with those who are the principal stakeholders of that legislation, which is the startups and the innovators and the consumers and the other ecosystem associated. So we are doing that. Hopefully by the end of this month, we will have a draft. And we will have a much more detailed discussion around the draft.
The payments that we have done, it is globally recognized. It's one of the most outstanding things that we have been able to create, I think, objectively speaking, because there's no question of monopolies in the whole payment space, which is not really the scenario in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw that Economist article about India's digital infrastructure on offer to the world and how that is part of our diplomacy and so on and so forth. And
in fact, I saw Japan asking to buy and use and license the
UPI.
stack. So aside from payments, how accessible do you see the government making the India stack to private players?
Look, the India stack is available to private players. But the India stack solves a use case which is between government and a citizen. The private sector or the startups are involved in the developer ecosystem in terms of implementing it, executing it, customizing it. And because it is open source, any startup can play with that stack and say, I have a better version of UPI, I have a better version of DigiLocker, I have a better version of this. I have a version that works in Tamil, I have a version that works in... So you can create a security layer, you can create a language layer, you can create additional apps and functionalities on it. And we just had a DPS summit in Pune where 3 countries have signed MOUs where they want to implement the India stack in their countries. And the premise here or the offer that the Prime Minister has made to the world is that all the narrative around tech used to be about haves and have-nots. So the Western world would have all these fancy technology and the poor countries, the global South would basically continue their old style governance. So we are offering all of this to the global South, LMICs, low and middle income countries, and saying, look, here is an open source platform. You can use the entire stack, you can use pieces of the stack, you can customize the stack. And the most compelling proposition for you is for countries that had zero or little of a digital economy, this can be the catalyst to creating an innovation ecosystem and innovators in your own country. So I think it's being received very, very excitedly by many, many countries. And we will see, I think, at least 10 to 12 countries implementing it very quickly.
Yeah. I think we should, I want to just get quickly into the manufacturing piece. I think, Tim Cook made a famous visit in the last month. Apple is this big sort of pride brand that we sort of talk about, operating out of India and manufacturing, assembling. How happy are you with the journey of smartphone manufacturing in India and other electronic manufacturing?
I don't think it's about me being happy. I think everybody in India should be extremely excited about these huge, large factories that have come into India. And today we are manufacturing and almost 100% of the mobile phones we consume in India. In 2014, 82% of all the mobile phones consumed in India were imported.
Yeah.
And you know the legendary shutting down of Nokia, where
Yes.
Nokia was made to run away from the country.
Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, Tamil Nadu. And today we have a situation where we are exporting, this year we would have exported 1 lakh crores of Apple and Samsung phones. And it is the fifth exported category of products from India. So this is a tremendous journey in just the last 8 years.
Fantastic.
And you know, one of the things that Tim Cook said when he met me was that we are so deeply grateful or happy, the exact word I don't know, but that we were able to ramp up so quickly in India. And it is because of all the work that had gone into policy making and creating an enabling environment leading up to that. That 2019 onwards, they have just ramped up so fast. And they've had all of their EMSs come here and set up shop, Pegatron, and I've been to all of those factories. And the amazing thing about this, Anand, is that those factories employ 74% women. And this is a tremendous story of empowerment that I always get very excited by. And these are all women from semi-urban, rural backgrounds who are today assembling a cutting-edge, world-class product
wonderful.
that is going to markets all around the world. It's just a brilliant story of transformation that I never tire of repeating.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'll just say one piece and then maybe take a few questions from the audience.
Yeah,
If you're
sure,
okay with that. I'll just say one piece and this is just my just opportunity, but you know, the e-waste is something that we are just, I know there's policy, but I don't think there's policing. I live in Mumbai. It's becoming the most polluted city in the world every winter now, the way it's going. And we have batteries and old cell phones and disposed diapers and banana peels all getting piled up in the same...
And plastic cases.
And plastic cases and water and disposal, and all gets piled up in the same landfill. And I'll just tell you, the average life expectancy of somebody who lives in Deonar, which is the largest landfill in Mumbai, is 40 years old. And the national average, I think, is 74. So I think this is one thing that, while manufacturing happens, I just wanted to park it with you.
It is certainly on our radar, and certainly during the G20 presidency, when we have talked about sustainability as one of the key goals, we are MeitY, as working with the Ministry of Environment, Bhupender Yadavji, we are certainly working out a plan on how to deal with and create the right amount of incentives and disincentives on e-waste management.
Yeah.
So you'll hear about this fairly soon.
I'm sure. I'm happy. I'm sure with a techie like you and somebody who knows and seen the world, I know that you'll...